We are 72 hours away from what could potentially be a major situation for portions of the southeastern United States. What exactly is coming up and more will be coming up. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Nate, and welcome back to another weather forecast discussion, this time for August 27th, 2023. Now, we still have the two tropical systems that we're talking about. We're talking about Franklin, and then we're talking about Idalia, which is going to be heading up into the Big Bend of Florida. So, bunch of things that we're going to have to talk about here. As you guys saw on the map, here is Franklin. This is just to the east of Florida, and over here is Idalia, which is south and west of Florida and is right next to the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. We're going to start with Franklin first. Here is the official cone of uncertainty for Franklin. You can see that it is anticipated to be a major hurricane on Monday afternoon, and it will continue to be a major all the way up until it gets north of Bermuda. Just because this is out in the middle of the sea does not mean that this isn't going to be impactful to people, because if there are people on the beaches of the United States, rip currents are going to be a major risk with a major storm like this. And of course, with Bermuda, there's also going to be a lot of storms that are going to be firing off from Franklin that are going to continue to cause issues such as storm surge, maybe some localized flooding, maybe the chance for a couple tornadoes. So if you're in Bermuda, I definitely would watch out for this, especially as this moves on from Tuesday into Wednesday. Take a look at the satellite imagery here for Franklin. You can clearly see that this thing has started to swirl all the way around with a bunch of thunderstorms. It's starting to become a little bit more uniform, and that's usually a good sign for a healthy tropical system. Of course, it is not a major quite yet, so that means that it doesn't really have as much well-defined characteristics as you usually would like. If you were typically looking for a stronger tropical system, all these little bubbles of these little dark reds and blacks that are inside the eye wall would be more sporadic and more consistent. And so because we only have that on one side of the storm, that kind of means that this storm isn't really intensifying that significantly. But give it time. Maybe this time tomorrow, we probably will be seeing a lot more significant thunderstorms. As a matter of fact, overnight, that's usually when thunderstorms usually start to fire off a lot more consistently, and that could indicate more of a strengthening period for a tropical system. So watch out for Franklin here as this moves on through. You can see that this thing is trying to form an eye wall here on the microwave satellite imagery, but it's just not all completely consistent quite yet. On the western side of the eye, you can clearly see there's an abundance of thunderstorms that are kind of forming and congealing together. But on that eastern side, it just is not strong enough. You can see how there's even a little bit of a weak area here of thunderstorm activity that's kind of wrapping into that center of low pressure. So until that forms a complete uniform eye wall, this thing won't really begin to intensify quite rapidly yet. Now, they did do some reconnaissance this morning. This is a 100-mile-per-hour hurricane that would be a Category 2. So just something to note, this thing is going about. They are constantly sending in planes on both Idalia and Franklin. We'll actually talk about the planes with Idalia a little bit later on, something that's really interesting that you guys are going to love. But as of right now, they're going to send one in again, see if Franklin is strengthened anymore, and see if it could impact any more areas than it's already forecasted. But I think there is one consistency here, at least with everything, is that Franklin has always been forecasted to stay out mainly to sea. You saw that with the cone of uncertainty, and now you're going to see it here with the models on the GFS. Down here on the off part of your screen is where Franklin's going to come from. And there's going to be this trough that's going to move on through with a bunch of this yellow and orange, which is just cyclonic vorticity. And so that is essentially going to steer Franklin all the way away from the coastline and allow this thing to actually move out further and further out to sea. But would you know, look at this. Here is Idalia down here on the GFS model. Somewhere over here in the Big Bend is where we're anticipating landfall. And you know what? Let's just get straight into it. Idalia right now is a 40-mile-per-hour tropical storm, recently been designated as of this morning, and now it's starting to be forecasted to become a little bit of a stronger hurricane upon landfall. And because of that, hurricane watches have now been issued for portions of Florida. If you're in a hurricane watch, especially if you're on the areas over near Tampa Bay, I would honestly really watch out. Anywhere that's on the eastern side of the circulation is really going to get the brunt of this impact. Maybe this doesn't end up being a significant hurricane. Maybe it does. But regardless, that's where the significant amount of storm surge is going to be. Anywhere along that coastline, it's going to continuously get that flow as this thing spins in a counterclockwise fashion. So just something to note. If you're over there on that eastern side from Fort Myers all the way up to Apalachicola, you guys are going to want to watch out regardless. But you guys are in a hurricane watch now. So here's a look at the visible satellite imagery from Idalia. You can clearly see there are so many more thunderstorms than there were yesterday, but it still has some issues over there in that northwestern quadrant. It's going to have to fill up some of those thunderstorms, but the solution to it trying to get stronger is it's starting to get more and more showers and thunderstorms to blow up near that center area of low pressure. That's going to allow the thing to try and vertically align. It's got the rotation, all right, the circulation is currently tilted on an axis. It's not exactly right over the top of each other. And in order for tropical systems to be significant and to try and strengthen, you need it to be vertically aligned. And right now, the mid-level circulation is just displaced off towards the south and east, contrast to the lower level circulation, which is a little bit more towards the north and west. But regardless, you can see on the radar imagery here from Cancun, of course, you can see right here is Cancun, right here is a little bit of Cuba. And you can see a lot of strong thunderstorm activity here on the southeastern side of this general swirl that is right in here. And that tells me that this thing is really starting to try to get its act together and to try and vertically align, because those thunderstorms are going to kind of hold the circulation in place to allow it to get there. And so when you start to see some high values of reflectivity that is starting to form in some of these spots, that tells you that this thing really is going to try and make a move. And I wouldn't be surprised if tonight this thing starts to really intensify and gain a good footing over into portions of the open waters. Now, reconnaissance has gone into this thing. It has seen tropical storm force winds in these little light green wind barbs here. So this thing is, of course, a tropical storm. It also had a pressure of 998 millibars before it had to go back over to Florida. But the interesting thing here is that they actually found something. I already talked about this on Twitter or X or whatever they call it nowadays, but the radar on the aircraft for the hurricane hunters found something very interesting. The lower level circulation and the mid-level circulation is displaced. All right, so hear me out. This is the general rotation of Idalia, right? And this is the closed lower level circulation. Now you see how it's not exactly in the middle of the giant general spin, the giant circle? That's because the lower level circulation is trying to align with the mid-level circulation, which just so happens to be a bit further towards the south and east, somewhere over here. And because of that, it's trying to kind of meet up with it and to vertically align. And this further tells you that is the case because according to the plots here of what they found, right here at about 20 degrees in the latitude and about 85.8 degrees longitude, or negative at least, that's where the lower level circulation was, but the mid-level circulation was all the way down here at negative 85.6 to negative 85.4, and of course 19.6, which is south and east by a good bit here, which means it's not vertically aligned at all. So assuming the next pass, which will be tomorrow morning, I believe, we'll go in there and to try and figure things out. By the next time I make a video, which will be tomorrow night, you'll see the L and the M stacked right on top of each other. And that's usually a pretty bad sign in order for us to try and, if we want this thing to not strengthen, end up become a hurricane, we need that to not happen. Now, there is something that the hurricane hunters are doing right now, and that is some upper-level reconnaissance. This is essentially when the plane goes out in front of the hurricane, it tries to figure out what the environment is like, and it sends it to the models, so that way the models can actually figure out where the storms are going to go, as well as how strong it's going to be. Now, none of the models that I'm going to show you here today are going to actually reflect what the data that has been taken by the hurricane hunters have received. That'll be a lot later on tonight when the new models come out. But what we have seen, they have launched a lot of probes into the atmosphere in front of it. This is going to basically record the environment around it and then send it back into the models. And as of me actually recording this, they've sent out 19, and I'm actually going to show you what that 19th probe saw, and it actually is very, very dry out in front. So we talked about how dry air is not very good for a tropical system because you want a lot of moisture for thunderstorms to form, right? But if you have dry air, well, it becomes less and less humid. And clouds and thunderstorms, that's high humidity. And so if you have nothing but high humidity, boom, storms can continue to go. Well, what you can see here is you can see the temperature line here in this red, and you can see this green line is very far away from the red, especially over here at 500 millibars. And anytime the green is very far away from the red, it's very dry. And you can actually see here on the relative humidity chart, all these little brown numbers, this 19%, 5%, that's pretty dry humidity values, which means that there's a lot of dry air out in front of us. So if this storm weakens or if it stays the same and it's not able to continue to strengthen, this is what it's got to deal with, and that's our saving grace for it to prevent it from being a hurricane. But the unfortunate thing is, this is the other thing that it has to deal with. Very, very warm sea surface temperatures. Now, I think it's no surprise that the sea surface temperatures, especially in the Gulf of Mexico, have been above average, near record highs, but this is not exactly what we are actually looking for. We are actually looking for the ocean heat content, which is how much heat the ocean waters can actually have, especially as it extends further down, depth-wise, into the ocean. And it just so happens that there is a lot of heat where this thing is going. Anywhere in this orange to light green, it's good enough for this thing to continue to intensify if it were to try to. So the waters are perfect, and especially as of right now where it is currently sitting, it's definitely got a good enough amount of sea surface temperatures for it to be able to try and intensify as is. And that's kind of what it's doing right now. Now, there's a nice little algorithm that I like to look at that kind of gives me in the back of my head, well, what's the probability of this thing rapidly intensifying? Because right now, it's forecasted to be a Category 1 upon landfall. But what if it could be more? What if it could be a major hurricane? Well, we throw it into this algorithm here. And of course, this is the rapid intensification guidance algorithm, if you will, from the SHIPS model. And we can see the probabilities, or the percentage probabilities, of rapid intensification. Now, we can look at this, we can see the thresholds of intensification over 12 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours here, right? And of course, the wind speeds, the increase over that time period. I want you guys to pay attention to this right here. 65 knots, which is about 75 miles per hour in 72 hours. That is about 3 days. 3 days. There is a 40% chance, according to this algorithm, of that happening. That's about a 50-50 shot. And usually when you have that high probs, that usually means that it's got a good shot at happening in general. And I just see, especially for stuff that is out in front of it, the only thing that's really stopping it is the dry air. The only thing that's really stopping it is the dry air at this point. And right now, the storm has been ahead of schedule in everything in regards to it forming, in regards to its intensity, everything. And so we're just trying to see, well, if this thing can kind of stutter just a little teeny bit, then maybe this becomes a little bit less likely, okay? But on its current pace right now, it does look like this thing could probably be more than just a Category 1. I'm personally thinking, all right, now, I'm not an official person, but I'm personally thinking that this thing could be a major hurricane. I'm thinking Category 3, somewhere around that ballpark when there's a landfall that's going to be happening somewhere in Florida. Now, I say that there's dry air. I say that there's a lot of heat for this thing to go. Wind shear, I mean, there is wind shear, but it's not really going to be all too significant. All the wind shear is really going to be impactful on the northern side of the storm, and it won't really hit it until the mid to latter stages of Monday. So you can take a look here. We have an upper level low right here over portions of the Dixie Alley area. We also have another upper level low over here in the portions of Mexico. And this is going to continue to move on through all the way into Monday afternoon. You can see The trough then starts to dig down right here as this low pressure system starts to move through the Yucatan Peninsula and the Cuban Channel right in that area. And as it continues to move off to the north, that's when it can start to experience some shear. Now, that's the interesting thing. How much shear is there going to be at this stage? If it's stronger shear, then it can actually repel it just a little bit more and limit it. But if there is less shear than forecasted, then we talk about rapid intensification again. But the GFS does think that we're probably going to see a Category 2, maybe a Category 3 upon landfall. So this is definitely something to watch out for. A 963 millibar low pressure system right in the Big Bend area of Florida. Now, I also want to mention here some of the worst case scenarios that could happen. Some of our higher quality hurricane models have been picking this thing up, and the trend has been moving a bit further to the east. I mentioned in the video yesterday that landfall could be somewhere around Apalachicola, all the way over towards the Big Bend of Florida. The models are now starting to shift that east even further towards the main area of the Big Bend of Florida into the Cedar Key area. So if you know anyone who lives in those areas and anyone south of that, all the way down into Tampa Bay, this is the thing to watch out for. You see these bands that are extending on the sides of Idalia. This right here can not only cause, of course, a localized tornado risk, but it also is going to force a lot of the storm surge inland. And this is where the major activity could occur if you are near the water. And so the big thing here is, regardless if you are over here near Apalachicola or regardless if you are over here in Tampa, if you are near the coastline, you need to get out. All right, that's my recommendation right now. If you are near the coastline at all, you need to get out. Whether that is a mobile home or whatever, the best thing for you to do is to probably head north, and if you can, probably head west. Try to avoid this thing in its entirety, but realistically speaking, you don't want to be anywhere near this thing. If you're over here near Tampa, or maybe even areas a little bit north of Tampa, it might be a good idea for you guys to head south as well. Maybe over near the Fort Myers area, or maybe Miami, somewhere on the east coast of Florida. That would probably be good, but don't head over to Jacksonville. There's going to be a lot of rain, maybe a lot of localized flooding in those areas as well. So I talked about storm surge. Let's get into it. You can see here from Indian Pass and the Apalachicola area all the way over towards the Big Bend of Florida, that is going to be around 2 to 7 feet of storm surge. But once you get from the Osceola River, I think that's how you pronounce it, all the way down towards areas north of Tampa Bay, towards the Anclot River, we're probably talking about 7 to 11 feet of storm surge, and then maybe some 5 to 8 feet of storm surge in some of the smaller localized areas. And then, of course, Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, you guys are not out of the clear, especially if this thing makes landfall a little bit further east. If this thing makes landfall a bit further east, storm surge could be higher, about 5 to 8 feet of storm surge at most. But a modest 3 to 5 feet of storm surge is forecasted as of right now. And then, of course, over towards the Keys, not really too high, but still very choppy waters. I recommend, if you guys are out on the beaches, don't go, all right? This rip currents are going to be a serious issue here, and just do not risk it. You do not want to be swept out into these very, very dangerous waters. And last but not least, we got to talk about the flooding potential, of course. A lot of rain is going to be forecasted over towards the Tallahassee area. Don't be surprised if this thing moves a bit further towards the east, though. I would not be surprised at all if we could see some higher values of rain as well as more sporadic values of rain as well. Don't be surprised if we see any red values of 10 to 15 inches of rain possible within this general vicinity. But other than that, there is the threat for some localized flooding, so please be sure to watch out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that'll be it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family on social media. Also follow me on social media, link will be in the description down below. I will have a video tomorrow, and we will be live. We will be live when this thing makes landfall. Landfall is somewhere around Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. That is when we are going to be live for. Probably going to be live for a good 8 hours. So we'll be around. We'll be around to try and make sure that all sorts of information is given out and supplied to all of you who may need it. So thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I will catch you guys tomorrow. So peace out.